the minutes from April 23rd, 2024.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Elzing, second by Commissioner Meyer to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. Chairperson's report. We will have a shack meeting on Thursday. And we'll see what, of course, we've been getting a lot of updates from Minnesota Department of Health about the water, the nitrates, the programming and everything that's going on. And a lot of some concern, with our traditional, I don't know if you call it influenza or the bugs that go around. But there's no specific bug. It's just people get different symptoms, different conditions and everything, but no outbreak of any major catastrophe, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I guess we'll go to the shack meeting and see what other good news they have.
Are you going
Yes.
to there's a tour afterwards of the public health lab, which
Oh, I've been on it, and it's been a while.
you've
but
seen it before?
Yeah.
I thought I would go to that. I had read.
Pretty cool. Just careful so you don't pick up any new bugs.
Yeah,
You
bring
go to
'em
the
here.
labs.
Bring them here. Yeah.
You go to the
Maybe
labs.
bird flu, right?
Yeah. So, yes, they do that periodically, and it is pretty impressive. All right, consent business. Item number 4, approve Minnesota Department of Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Grant Project Agreement. And I know we have our department head here. Or Ross is filling in.
Morning, Rob.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is just the replacement agreement for the agreement that is expiring. So it's just kind of routine funding for ongoing public health emergency preparedness work. So
I'll move to approve item 4.1. Second.
We have a motion to approve the Emergency Health Preparedness Response Grant Project Agreement made by Commissioner Vagley, second by Commissioner Olson. Just a comment is that it should just be base funding. It shouldn't be a grant. I mean, we are obligated to do the public health work for the state of Minnesota. So it should just be, in my opinion, base funding, not even called a grant. But I think they'd like to do that.
I believe it's coming through the feds, and that's just
They're
how
determined.
far ahead they will fund it. So they don't just sustain it in perpetuity. So
Not the worst.
And I know we did get information a couple meetings ago and everything about our plan. So is this, I guess, this is the health portion because we have emergency preparedness in a weather related, with Mr. Klinger and everything, but that's a separate pot of money. This is for the health portion of preparedness.
yeah, this is to ensure that all the health entities within a community are talking with each other and coordinating. So
Okay, all right. So motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion approved. General discussion. 5.1, discuss and provide direction on the use of foundational public health responsibility funding.
So this is a follow-up to the last meeting when apparently the communications did not follow with the board of health packet. So just kind of a follow-up. At the beginning of the year, when Melanie was still the CHS administrator, she had brought the foundational public health funding work to the board. And at the time, the board had concerns, one about the new 75% match, and second, about the reliability of the funding. So I prepared the memo in March, kind of addressing some of the follow-up issues that we were receiving from the state. As far as the fact that we do have environmental health match. So finding the new 75% match is not an issue because we're already spending it in departments outside of CHS, but we can use that funding as match. So that issue has pretty much been resolved. We did prepare a placeholder budget for the Community Health Board just because there were time limits that the state set for us. And we did focus more on contracted work or temporary work, given the board's concern about adding staff with funding. This foundational public health funding is within legislation to continue. The hope of the state is to incorporate it more as a component to the local public health grant. While it will be focused on foundational public health aspects that the state is still defining, it is designed to be ongoing funding. So it's just a matter of as this goes along, we can start with maybe contracted work, and depending on how things proceed as to whether you would want to use any of that funding for adding staff in hotspots. So that would be just a kind of a future planning aspect.
Mr. Meyer.
So it's about 50,000?
It's 204,000.
It's 204. Okay, I was great. All right, and I know we got our match covered. Okay, so when would we get the funding?
It is a reimbursement type operation. So as we expend funds, we submit invoices quarterly and are reimbursed for that fund.
And then of your list, are there specific things, because you can't probably fund all of that with the 200,000, but
Yeah.
I thought that was going forward, maybe when it's dependable funding.
As I indicated, some of these are example type duties based on the guidance that the state had prepared, and with the absence of both the Health and Human Services Director and the Health and Human Services Supervisor, who are going to play an important role in that, we kind of just threw some things out there.
Yep.
So we are able to amend the budget at any time. We can amend the scope of the work at any time. There is some community health improvement plan work that they would like to use some of this funding for, and they're just kind of waiting to get a go ahead to start utilizing this funding. The rest of the items, hopefully now with Eric on board, and hopefully we'll have a permanent CHS administrator on board, then they can start amending the budget or utilize these examples is basically what I've prepared. So
I would just say that I would support whatever staff thinks is the highest priority in terms of whatever can help the community the most. So
yeah, so with preparing this and just getting oriented to CHS in the interim role, these were things that kind of kept popping up that they not only coincided with things that were included as activities in foundational public health responsibilities, but needs that I was seeing within the program. So,
and last thing that I was curious to know is, so environmental health comes as one of the foundational, and so some of this could be used for certain aspects of the private well contamination, although there's other money coming for that, and that's in our match.
Overall, think of the foundational public health responsibility as very broad based. If you start going into a specific area or serving a specific subset of the population, you could find that activity is not an approved activity. The idea behind the foundational public health responsibility funding is to ensure that regardless of where you are in the state, regardless of your population, regardless of anything, you will have access to the same level services from county to county, regardless of where you are from the state. So it's very broad-based funding. And if you start trying to use it to, say, fund a specific subset of the population, it would have to be something that would be approved by the state. So as we come up with ideas, we have a contact person that we would communicate with and get that approved, and then amend our budget as well as our work plan.
Great, thanks.
How would they actually, I mean, eventually it's got to trickle down to an end user,
I think they got a little surprised with this funding because they're still sending us more information on potential uses and what's acceptable and what's not. Our plan was approved with what I submitted by MDH, so they found it acceptable to proceed with. Other counties did see some of their proposals rejected.
Really?
So it it does matter and it is evolving. So
It's a quandary. I'm sorry, in my opinion, and I've been with public health since day one, they got thrown a whole bunch of money at them because of the pandemic and the COVID and everything. So they got again, legislature threw, and federal and state threw a whole bunch of money at them. They're trying to figure out how best to, of course you got to spend it. And they love their acronyms and everything, and they play with all these big words when we go to these shack meetings. I say, come on, you're talking to some county commissioners, and that we need to bring it down from all your high level, terminology and things like that. But what Ross is saying is, if you stop and think, public health has always been about the health of the herd. You're trying to take care of the whole herd, not and then you do go into specifics in public health, but that's the grand thing is to take care of the whole herd.
There seems to be a little bit of an initiative at the state level to start pushing us towards an accreditation process.
Yes,
And
I don't know what that game
and a lot of the aspects that are being identified as acceptable expenditures are within the accreditation process. So I think they're starting to push us in that direction. So
I would agree. And I do give some pushback on it because I do ask at check, where does that, raise our public health? So we got another certificate we can hang on the wall that we're accredited and stuff
Another
like
staff person that takes
Yeah.
up 50%.
And there is, and you talk about budget, and we got a couple minutes, you talk about budget. They have in some of their documentation and everything, they allude that this is starting money, and they allude that you may have to supplement with local, I'm getting a nod from Ms. Holte, local property taxes to continue this work. So it's let's get the ball rolling, and as the ball's rolling down the hill, then the locals, got to
Sucker you in and then
keep it going.
fish up.
Although we are, because we have like a 200,000 in expenses that is coming out of the levy for wells, for septic systems though, and solid waste. And that is our match.
Yeah, the accreditation process is expensive to get going, and it does have a significant ongoing cost. So that would be likely to be experienced as an unfunded.
If they want to fund it, that's also a point of bringing.
And you are the professional, so I think you probably know better than I do what is acceptable to the state. But when they talk about the foundational public health responsibilities, one of them is, yes, that everyone should have access to the same kind of, but it's not just services, it's like sort of the same clean water is what I'm getting at, right? So if you are rural and have a well, but I live in the city of Winona and I have access to clean water, why should you not, just because of your zip code? I mean, that is what they say, which would lead me to think, well, why wouldn't this be usable to help people have a quality of life and access, because surely having access to safe drinking water is significant,
They
right?
probably want to spend it on the great mighty Mississippi River because that covers most of the state of Minnesota.
Oh, it's all, but we don't get our drinking water from there, so.
Kind of-
But I trust you. I trust that you're telling us exactly what you're hearing, so.
But potentially as an example is like if you wanted to fund a position that would coordinate activities for the entire county, but if you wanted to use the money, say, to fund each individual site where you would put in a treatment unit or something like that for the water supply, that would probably run afoul of the requirements.
Okay. So actually, this whole concept needs to be, I see one of our committee members here, the Health and Human Service Advisory Committee needs to, be on top of this too. And, give public input, what they want and what they don't want. And our wants and wishes and needs and desires are all different. Anything else that you want from us today?
Just that you are okay with us proceeding to implement the work plan. It can be amended. Significant amendments can be brought back and reported to the board before we proceed.
Do you want a motion? Formalize that?
I think it probably would be appropriate. So
But is there a page? Are you talking about the items on page 12
I think
as the
so.
work plan?
That's what I thought.
Starts with a short series of videos and then.
yes, yeah.
That's-
I have a more formal work plan that basically reiterates kind of the listing that I provided you within the memo.
Okay, so
And-
you should probably send that more formal one to us, because this is what we've received in this whole thing. Is this the work?
High level,
Yeah,
but the concept is that he has a more detailed
Yeah.
one, but that's can get modified,
Sure.
so.
Yeah, we had to enter a budget and work plan into red cap. So that is the formal budget, but pretty much everything you see listed here is within the work plan that I entered into red cap. And it has dollar figures attached to it. So
okay, I guess I would like to see a
I
copy of
can,
that.
I can forward that along.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable approving it? With seeing it later?
Yes and no. I mean, we're building positions, I see positions built into
Yeah,
here,
they're,
and
yeah,
positions
they're gonna-
cost money, and are they
They're-
contract positions?
yeah, there are no, they will all be either temporary or contracted positions.
So how about this?
For
I would
specific-
get- I'm gonna say that I moved to provide direction based on this work plan with the idea that we will get the formal work plan back at some future date.
Because nowhere in here does it say an official staff position. I
No.
see temporary adding hours. There's, a little contract verbiage, but it would be nice to find that, so.
I think the alternative would be to say, oh, we don't want this money at all, we're gonna reject it, which is not, I don't know. I want us to go ahead and take the funds and use them for the community.
We have to
Very
be
careful that we don't
cautious.
create something that we got to figure out how to fund later. So,
Yeah, there is no contract. It is just simply funding that has been provided. So there are no contractual terms. It's just we're only allowed to spend the money on approved work plan and budget specified items.
I could go with the way you phrased it.
Okay, and Commissioner Olson, all right, all those in favor of accepting the work plan? The incomplete, the incomplete,
Motion as was made.
yeah.
There we go, good job.
Recommendation.
Recommendation.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. All right, thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, any other business for the public health at this point? And I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move, so move.
Okay, made by Commissioner Meyer, second by Commissioner Elsing to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
All right, and we'll begin the normal meeting of the county board. Please rise and join me in saying the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
The first order on every county board meeting is public comment. If anyone would like to share thoughts with the county board, please approach the podium, state your name and your address. The same goes for people who may be joining us online. Everyone is given 2 minutes to speak. There are clocks on both of the screens to keep track of where you're at. Would anyone like to share any thoughts with the county board? I'll ask 3 times. Would anyone present or online like to share any comments with the county board? And I'll ask one last time, is there anybody who would like to share comments with the county board? All right, we'll close the public comment section. The next item is number 4, approve county board minutes from May 28th.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Elsing, seconded by Commissioner Olson. Any discussion? All's in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 5, acknowledge receipt of approved committee minutes. One is for the Planning Commission from April 18th, and the other is from the Board of Adjustment, also from April 18th.
I'll move to approve or acknowledge the receipt of the approved committee meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Ward, seconded by Commissioner Elsing. Any other discussion? All's in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 6, consent, comments, and approval of agenda. Commissioner Elsing.
Just 7.6, just a quick question and a comment, potential committee of the board action.
Okay, so 7.6, quick question, or should we pull it?
Pull it, please.
We'll make 7.6. Should we make it, what number does that become?
I guess a whole new category.
Well,
8.1?
8.1 or 7.15.
We'll make it
Oh.
8.1. How about that?
Yeah.
And then we'll just amend the agenda to make item number 8, number 9. Does that work?
Yeah.
And adjourn would become 10 and 11.
Sure.
Easy fix. So 7.6, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Olson?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Ward?
I approve them, but I think we need a little more discussion on 7.8, 7.9, 7.10, and 7.11. It's all related to the water issues. So I guess pull them. They're kind of all lumped together, but
Okay, so we'll make,
thank you.
9, 8, 9, 10,
8,
11.
9, 10, and 11.
so we'll make 7.8 the new 8.2. We'll make 7.9 the new 8.3. We'll make 7.10 the new 8.4. And then we'll make 7.11 the new 8.5.
Thank you. And then a announcement at the end.
Thank you,
Please.
Commissioner Olson.
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Meyer.
I would just have a committee report, WinLAC, one watershed, one plan met yesterday.
Thank you, Ms. Holte,
Nothing, sir.
Ms. Sonneman.
Nothing for me, thank you.
All right. Okay, with that, we'll need a motion to.
I
approve.
move to approve the amended agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion by Commissioner Ward, seconded by Commissioner Meyer to approve the amended agenda. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Ms. Holte, can you read the remaining consent items into the record, please?
7.1, approve conditional use permit for Bass Camp and Kelly Robecki. 7.2, approve performance measures resolution. 7.3, approve renewal of liquor on off sale licenses and 3.2% off sale licenses. 7.4, approve Minnesota Department of Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Grant Project Agreement 2025 to 2029. 7.5, approve memorandum of understanding for Southeastern Minnesota Area Agency on Aging Adult Protection Pilot Program. 7.6 was pulled. 7.7, award bid for 2024 pavement markings to Sir Lines A Lot LLC. 7.8, 7.9, 7.10, 7.11 were all pulled. 7.12, approve well sealing contract with Clifford Pierce. 7.13, approve disposal of excess furniture and equipment. And 7.14, confirm payment of disbursements.
I'll move to approve the consent business as it was read.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Olson. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 5-0. That then brings us down to the new items 8.1, 8.2, 8.3. So the new item, 8.1 was formerly 7.6, approved purchase of services and business associate agreements with Anna Sasaki. Sasuski,
This is that's
Okay.
we think.
independent agent. That's on page 79, I believe.
79, yep.
Chelsea, I think you had a question.
Yeah, well, a little bit of this is just for me to understand the process, being, the newer one to the board and how we decide to go with somebody, I guess, and whose decision was it Marines, or how do we know that CAM system is out and we find a new person to do it? Or just understanding, was it cost related? Was it CAM systems wasn't doing their job? How do we kind of come up with this person? So that just simple, trying to understand as we run government and fluid in the decision making. So that's all I had.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Holte.
Commissioners, what happened is, if you recall, Bruce Wimett was the individual that we had contact the county to give this service through CAM, and he retired. And so we became knowledgeable of that, and Miss Hannah contacted us stating that she had taken over.
Okay.
Right.
So this is just a transition of the same thing, just different person. Perfect. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
All right. Can you, well, I guess we need a motion to.
Motion to approve. One quick question in between that. So did the rates change? Everything stay the
Stayed the
same?
same. Actually, we have additional equipment that's offered through this contract, and which was on the previous.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
Mhm.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Just a turn.
I'll second it.
Motion by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner Ward?
Just a side comment. I did get a hold of Mr. Wilmette late last night, and he was very confident in Ms. Hannah's capabilities and had trained her. So yeah, I got clarity on that for you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 8.2, which was 7.8, approve authorization of contracts for safe drinking water for private users grant. Commissioner Ward, did you want to start with the question or should we call it staff?
Well, the whole, with all of these things, as I said, we're getting a lot of money, pockets of money coming in here and there, different agencies and everything. And not that we can't use the money, but of course, one of my concerns is that we use it the best we can and we service the most people we can. So the question, because I did ask, and the new planning director, thank you very much. He gave me a quick little, chart of, try and follow. How do you follow the water? Water goes where it wants to go, And he gave me a quick little chart. The safe drinking water for private users is, and it printed on 2 pages, it's 100,000, Winona's getting 10. And some of these are, these are 9, 10 county grants. So, when 100,000 sounds like a lot, and then you divide it by 9, it gets small. The next one, private well mitigation, that's 400,000, but then it goes down to 49,875. And then the volunteer nitrate monitoring, again, is 77,950, but then it breaks down to 7,100. And the well sealing is, 68,000, and it breaks down to 10,000. The monitoring of who's going to get these dollars to best use them, I guess. Do we have one person in the county working with it? Because we got soil and water as a separate entity, and they're getting funds, we're getting funds. We got multiple departments. I see Sheila Harms back there. How are we going to keep track? And again, my concern is I'd like as many people to get the benefit. You talk about sealing a well or drilling a new well, there goes all your money. But if you're talking about giving, multiple people a reverse osmosis system, then you're covering a whole lot of people. So I guess I'm concerned about how we're getting the money and then how we're monitoring it and how we're going to help people. And again, one of the things too was Citizen A comes in. How do they follow the paper trail to get the most benefit for themselves? Or is it just a first serve, first come? I want a new well, give me, and I take the whole pot of money. So I don't know if we've figured that out yet.
Is that a question for Doug or Sheila or
Yeah,
Ross
and
or Eric?
who's the magic water person in Winona County today?
If I might,
Sheila.
if I might add on the way up, so having sat on the soil and water board for
Yeah.
many years, the complexity of the complexity of how we get money on these boards is overwhelming. I believe we counted it up one time. I think there was 32 groups, 32 water boards that are dealing with all these things, and it just gets to be almost overwhelming to stay on top of it.
That's what I just read yesterday.
Thank you.
So Sheila, you got the answer?
No, I don't have any answers, but I've got comments. But I appreciate your comments about, yes, there are lots of pots of money. These grants that are on the board agenda this morning, I might add, when the Minnesota legislature was debating and trying to figure out these grants were not connected to that money. Okay, that money is coming later and I don't know how it'll look or in what shape or form. But these pots of money were already in the works before the petition was even thought about. Okay, so just laying the groundwork for that. The $100,000 grant that's through the MDH, that's the Tap In initiative. We had that grant before. And that was a pilot project. And so the Southeast Minnesota was one of, I think the other one was over in Southwest Minnesota. So with that grant, we had a very minimal amount of money. We had I think it was about $8,000 to $9,000 for mitigation to drill a well and or do reverse osmosis systems. Winona County actually got a little bit more than what we were supposed to because another county wasn't able to get interested applicants. So with that grant, we helped drill a new well, but we paid 6,500 on that. And then we had 4 RO systems. So we had more than anybody else. That's just how the cards played out with interested applications. So that grant was done April of 2023. And then the plans were to just seamlessly flow into the next grant with that. But because of the petition, which came out in April 2023, it kind of put a delay on the implementation or the start of that phase 2 of the grant, because Department of Health was kind of reconfiguring and trying to figure out, because we had this petition out there. So now this is that phase 2 of the grant, and it's $100,000 divided between 9 counties, not the 8 counties that are identified in the petition, but just to be more inclusive of, I think, was it Dodge? I can't remember, maybe it was Rice County that was added. Rice. And so that $100,000 was the initial plan for the money to begin with, and then dividing it out. It also includes testing. So if it's evenly distributed among the 9 counties, we'll have enough test kits for 18 households, which isn't a lot, but each test costs about $120 to $130. It does the anions, does manganese, coliform, arsenic, in addition to nitrates. So the testing in this grant money is not constrained by the petition, because it's not. It was thought of before that. And the concern also was that they didn't want to test just for nitrates and have a household test their water and then have a false assurance that their water is okay when there might be a manganese issue. So that's why they're testing for all these other things. So that's that pot of money divided among 9 counties. It's not a lot, but it's what they had. Yes, Commissioner Elsing, you had a question? Oh,
You're done.
oh, and then the second grant, the MDA grant, that one is being driven by the nitrate petition, but those funds weren't explicitly legislated in this last legislative. The MDA found a pot of money somewhere, and they came up with $400,000. So those are the funds divided among the 8 counties for mitigation purposes. And then you had the question about how the funds will be distributed. Knowing that there's limited funding in these pots of money, it'll be, the first money coming down that's available. They're going to try and prioritize based on vulnerable populations that live within certain households, and also considering health or income status. So anyway, that's how that came down. The Volunteer Nitrate Monitoring Network money, that is strictly, I mostly nitrates. They have from time to time had funding to do other testing for other types of things. And that program has been going on consistently since 2008. It's a long-term nitrate trends analysis. And so that one we've been doing for a long time. And that one just comes every 2 years, and it just so happens this is the time to get it renewed for the next 2 years. And we currently test, the goal is to have about 4 volunteers involved in each township in the county. And so they're geographically spaced across the county. And so that's what that is about. And it's just doing the analysis. The well owner gets the information and is trying to track, what are the trends across the county and across the region. And so that's what that grant is. And that's consistent. That money is pretty consistent from one grant cycle to the next.
Just to clarify, 4 volunteers from each township.
Yes, that's what it that's our goal. It doesn't always work out. There are some,
Township or the?
each township,
Sounds
Wow,
but-
that's almost 80 people, right?
Yeah.
right.
It's a lot.
But there are some areas, I know there are, we call them grid nodes. There are 2 diameter circles that are across the county. And there are actually 2 that we absolutely have no available wells to test.
Okay.
But anyway, that's kind of the gist of the funding pots. And is there something else that you wanted?
Back to Commissioner Ward and then Commissioner Elsing, just to clarify, just so I make sure I'm hearing correctly. Commissioner Ward asked an important question, who's in charge of the money?
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
you're in charge, Sheila?
Or where does it?
Well, within this county, but for the grants as a whole, Caitlin Meyer, who's at Olmsted SWCD, she's the
Regional.
regional administrator for the grants. Yes,
So Winona County, you're the go-to person.
right.
Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner.
Yes.
Well, so again, so we talk about this, there's been a lot of nitrate, in the newspaper and everything. So again, Mike, and you said the interest, it seems like, how do we raise the level of interest and how do we get these people to use these, resources? So you have, just as a suggestion, we have a bi-monthly township officer meeting coming up tomorrow night. It might be a little soon, but how do we get the word out to the citizens and where do they go to start the process? That's what to me is still lacking, is that we're getting this money, everybody's all alarmed about it and everything, but how do we help the citizen that's out there just doing their day-to-day business? They don't have time to start Googling that,
Mm.
oh gee, where do I get a test, or where do I get a reverse
Right.
osmosis, or, oh my gosh, I got to go town and buy 10 cases of bottled water, and have plastic pollution and stuff like that.
Right.
So I guess that's one of the things that we need some clarity. Of course, we got the county fair coming up. Do we do some kind of networking,
Mhm.
to help people improve their own personal situation? That's one of my concerns.
Right. I
Is
agree.
that already part of the plan? Is like either a one-pager or a trifold and
Yes.
and
Yes.
or the county webpage
Right.
in plain
Right.
English for people to
Right.
understand.
Yeah.
Right. And we do have, it is on our website now that there's the regional nitrate and groundwater public meetings coming up. The one in Stewartville is Wednesday, the 12th and the 20,
I got it right here.
thank you.
It's part of my announcements. I can
Okay,
help you.
yes, there are 3 regional meetings.
Yeah.
One is online for people who can attend.
Yes.
But I plan to attend the one in Rushford.
June 26th.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Elsing.
Well, one of the things that I want to keep reiterating is the difference in these wells that we talk about all the time. And I mean, I remember putting a well in as a kid on the farm and talking with hundreds, if not thousands of farmers over the years about different things. And, and I realize not everybody's a farmer, but just rural people. Are we tracking the depth of these wells as we find the nitrate levels? So if we find a high nitrate well, do we know how deep that well is?
Yes and no.
But I've never seen any documentation on it.
During the 1984, or the preparation of the 1984 Geologic Atlas, Minnesota Geological Survey staff were around the county, and any property owner that was willing to share
Yeah.
specific well information is included in the Minnesota Well Index. It is anecdotal, so the accuracy, is what it is. So that is the primary source of information. And that is one of the things that is coming out of the new legislation, is a more systematic well inventory. But again, it's going to require the cooperation of the property owner. Do they want to share what information they have? Anything prior to 1974, when the state well code went into effect, the only information on any wells constructed prior to that would be within the homeowner's records or a well contractor's personal records.
Well, what I'm alluding to is that if we're using taxpayer money to fund testing and perhaps mitigation, I would think it would be some sort of a requirement, because to me, that's a pretty important piece of information. As you alluded to, since we've kept track of actually properly doing wells, 0.03% have now come back. I mean, it's literally eliminated the problem. And something that when I've sat on the soil and water board was, you know, banks, when we give loans out for rural residents, any residents, you know, they make sure the escrow's there, the property taxes, whatever it is. There's rules for the septic system, but there's virtually no information for the water side of it. I mean, yep, there's a well, or they have to disclose if there's a well on the property, and that's it. And then when we realize there's an issue, we turn to the taxpayer to say, well, help me out, right? Well, that's just as important as saying, is the roof good on the house to me? Potentially even more important, because I can live without a roof to a certain extent. So, you know, at the end of the day, I keep bringing us back to and saying that if we're going to use public funds to help people, which is good, there's some things I think we can learn and require that we get back. And one of the things that strikes me is that since we have began to track and require that things are done correctly, and knowing good and well that, and I'm going to say this loosely, this is loose lip, but we dig just far enough because it's the cheapest way to find water. If the water's brown, we'll go, or orange, we'll go down a little further. Nobody kept track. We know there's been nitrates. We know there's been issues in water since the beginning of recording it. We're just now bringing attention to it. And so when we dug wells the absolute cheapest way possible, as far as it took, so the water wasn't iron anymore. And that's really all we paid attention to. And now we're actually shining some light on it and saying, hey, let's go test for these other things. And we know proof is in the pudding. When done correctly, we virtually eliminate the problem. So I feel like one of the most key elements that we need is well depth to start to determine, hey, you know, is this just a shallow well? I see it in the herbicide programs. I see it with the way it affects farming, agriculture, and how things mix. We already know, and one of the first questions when I see a water test on a farm is I'll look at it and I'll say, you've got problems with your spray program, or you got problems getting this mixed up or something, because I'll look at the calcium content, the carbonate contents, the manganese contents. And even though they might not be necessarily high on a test, it's the combination of all of them working together that might be adverse. And one of the first questions I ask, because especially if I see high carbonate, I'll say, you got a shallow well, don't you? Yeah, grandpa put it in just enough to get water. Well, chances are we're going to find a problem with it. Right? So to me, I think this is, if we can figure out how to make that a requirement, that we need some sort of evidence to the best of their ability to try to figure out what that well depth is, because I believe we can start to correlate back that depth of well has a big thing to do with this issue.
Commissioner Meyer.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that you missed the presentation. That was the day that you were sick, because Mr. Dunsmore did a fabulous job. It's not just the depth, it's also, is it properly cased?
Yeah, and I wasn't training to go into all the details. I was just trying to make a 80,000 foot approach on that.
Yeah, water quality is a direct function of well construction. So, and that was kind of the gist of the presentation, was with new construction and decision making, you can control what your nitrate level is. There are options. Now, sometimes those come with trade-offs, because as you go into deeper formations, you pick up more dissolved minerals. Some people prefer to avoid, say, dissolved iron, so they want to stay in maybe a shallow aquifer, but that trade-off is going to come in the form of higher nitrate.
I wasn't quite finished. So,
I wasn't either.
yeah,
Commissioner Elsie.
we jumped over to
ahead.
you. So,
Commissioner.
so I'm going to go back to what I've said before many times, sitting with the SWCD, using public funds to address some of these issues. You know, I realize we have it and we got to figure out what to do, but I keep throwing this out here over and over and over. I don't necessarily want to create a law. I don't necessarily want to create any of this stuff, but I want to create education, the public awareness that when you're purchasing a property, there's more to it than just looking at the structure or how well do I like it. You know, oh my gosh, I get googly eyes and I got to have this place, and everything isn't really an issue until it becomes an issue. And, you know, putting some pressure on banks and real estate agents and, you know, people selling that, hey, these things need to be looked at and addressed. Because what's happening is we acquire it, or maybe it's been around for a certain amount of time, and then all of a sudden we're turning to taxpayers to fund it. So it's beyond just the purchase and the cost of it, but we need to address and have some sort of public awareness that, hey, do you know what well you have? We do it with the septic systems, but we don't really do it with the wells.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer.
Thanks. So I did kind of want to go back to some of Commissioner Elsing's comments. For me, the public health aspect of this is the most important part. And that is, yes, it's true that the well code works. But when Ross gave us that presentation, he estimated there might be between 8,000 and 9,000 wells in this county. We know where 4,800 of them are. The other 32 to 4,200, we don't know where they are because they're not on the well index. That probably means they were drilled prior to the well code being enforced by us. So we have not eliminated the problem from a public health aspect. So I think that we do owe it to those folks to help them if they want help, right? To identify their wells, to educate them, to help them get a test, and then to help them with whatever their short or long-term mitigation options are. So from that perspective, I would say we need to eliminate the problem, but we have not eliminated the public health problem. And so that is why I think these testing programs in particular, and then the mitigation programs specifically focus on places where there's a pregnant woman or a child in the home. They're the ones who will be damaged potentially by that contamination. So I am going to move to approve what is now 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, and 8.5 as presented in our packet.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Olson. Further discussion. Commissioner Ward.
Well, and I don't disagree. I agree. Yes, educating and getting it. So 7.9, actually in the summary, it says conduct outreach education to low-income families with private wells within the county, and then pay cost share and all. So it's got these things in it. So Sheila, is that your responsibility? Are you the educator? See, I see all this money coming in, and not that you don't have a full-time job, but I mean,
Okay.
it's
That-
going to require some extended effort.
Yeah, and that is the Tap In initiative. And that, a lot of the lion's share of that work was done the first time we had that grant. I would say, Caitlin Meyer had Roz, and Davis, I think her last name is. She was an intern at the time, and she worked on the videography. This is linked on our website. It's basically just an outreach tool for well owners. What do you need to know?
I'm sorry, our website is less than user-friendly. So
I
how
agree,
many
but-
searches, so can we put it, being that this is a hot topic, can we put it, here it is, push the button.
Okay.
Don't make them search through, you know what I'm talking about. You have to search through several layers and it's cumbersome, yes.
Mhm.
So can we move it up on the page?
I'll
Ms.
look
Holte, can
into
we do
that, but yes. So that website
should.
just basically
Don't
for a
hide it.
well owner, what do you need to know about your well? How to inspect your well to make sure that, did you run into it with the lawnmower and damage it? Do you know how, what you need to do, and then how often you need to test your well water to make sure that it is meeting drinking water standards. So that she put together that video. We have a lot of outreach materials that we can hand out at events, and
Okay, so it is there, I guess I'm.
yeah,
I was
and so
unaware of that.
that money in this particular grant is kind of revamping and reproducing some of those outreach materials so that we can pass them out at events. And
All right.
I just wanted to confirm too, and this goes back to one of your earlier questions, Commissioner Ward. Anyone who participated in the township testing program, they will send them a letter.
yes, I think that has already happened. MDA has sent those letters out. Yes.
All right.
Because there needs to be a benefit of taking part,
Right.
volunteering,
Yeah.
to take part.
Yes.
If there's a disincentive, you're.
Yeah. So in the letter, they would just inform that, reminding them that, you participated in the township testing program, your nitrates in that well water that you submitted is high. You are eligible for assistance, but in order to get that, they needed to sign a release form so that we can know who that person is, so that we can help them get the RO
I
system.
don't think I signed the release form. I wanted.
Are you pregnant?
Okay.
I don't think you could ask that question.
So to follow up,
I think
Discriminatory.
I think that's sex discrimination.
So Commissioner Ward asked, it's an excellent question. So there will be some kind of one pager or trifold developed for the county fair, for the township supervisors,
Mhm.
and things like that.
Mhm.
Make it easy.
And we also need to make, I agree, make the webpage easier to find, easier to read in plain English.
So Sheila gave me a folder that had some materials in it for the tap-in program. One
Yep.
of them was a magnet that goes.
Yep,
I
they're
just
all-
happened to be back in her
They're by
office,
my office, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
so you can see what that.
I do-
they're very-
Do you want me to bring them out? I can hand them out to everybody.
Well, so again, I plan on attending a township officer meeting, and that's a good broad base of people to get the word out. So if you have a few extras, I could take.
Oh, yeah, I can,
Great idea. Thank you.
It was tomorrow night. I think Steve Buswell's actually the guest speaker.
Yeah, talking, yeah,
About the jail.
he's all, yeah.
Commissioner.
Well, and this goes back to that education piece that I've tried to promote for years for people purchasing rural properties, that they need to pay attention to these things, and it's, nobody's talking about it. The banks aren't requiring it, or, real estate agent ain't gonna talk
Not
about it. And be aware of what you're buying, and, it's beyond just the structures. So, we see it in the soil and water too, where all of a sudden there's a drainage issue or there's something going on. So, whatever we can do to incorporate that in. So,
And to follow up on Commissioner Elsing's great point about when the inventory is conducted, is there a recording of the depth of the well, or only if the information is available?
well, definitely if we want to have the information, if it's available.
what are we actually asking for?
Oh, I was trying to look at the actual well index, but
I have no
Yeah.
idea. My
Oh,
well,
no.
I have no idea.
But if we can, but it makes people aware of it. By
Yeah,
just
Right.
simply asking the question.
Yeah.
And maybe they do know, it's just buried somewhere.
I
They
would
gotta
say-
ask grandpa.
So the question
Um,
is asked,
you know.
and if it is available, it's shared.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's a layperson's question. Is there a technology that would allow you to, Commissioner Ward doesn't know the depth of her well, like
Not
most
really.
people don't. Is there a way to,
You holler down and you count the echoes.
yeah, that works.
You drop a pebble.
What do you say? Do you say something specific in the echo? Just hello?
If it answers back, you're in trouble.
I think Ross wants to.
Um, Without clearing the borehole, it's very difficult to collect your measurements. Quite often, what we recommend people do is look for service stickers on their pump control motor box, pressure tank, contact their contractor on that and see if they have that information in the personal records. Because quite frequently, when they're replacing a submersible pump or something, they will measure up the well and they record that information in their files. So.
It's documented, sorry.
No, I mean, you're right. It needs to be publicly
It's-
documented.
It's
not dependent-
documented somewhere.
Yeah.
Typically, unless it's a very old well, because, submersible pumps, you might get 10 to, and some of them will last longer than that,
Yeah.
but somebody's been down that hole at some point and they know. So it isn't like they put the thing in the 50s and walked away. So.
Sure they did. The old well drillers, they were just the
Well, they
local
did,
guys.
yeah, but I mean, and again, they hit water. If it was brown, they went a little
Yeah.
farther down, that's the old saying. So somebody knows. So just got to dig a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Because that is really important. If an inventory is being done, that's a very valuable piece of
Yeah,
information. Absolutely.
100%.
So thank you, Ross. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank
So
you very
Sheila
much.
is the go-to person, and we're gonna look to upgrade and simplify the information. And yeah, because I get asked a handful of times every month as well. And I have to go and double. And when people have asked, Ross has been great in terms of helping a recent resident, et cetera, had a question. And so, but yeah, we need to make it simpler so we can help spread the news as well. Yeah, motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Olson. Any other further discussion?
That was
So-
to do all four of those.
Yep, I'll
Okay,
throw it one
Is,
more.
and then the commissioners are okay with all four?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion passes, which approves, which had been 7.8, 7.9, 7.10, and 7.11. I believe that brings us down to committee reports and communications correctly. Correct?
Yeah.
So that would, Commissioner Elstein, I apologize.
Yeah. I just wanted to make and maybe this is more of a general question, but what do we have with the recent changes in cannabis and the rules with allowing this to happen? Are we going to start to see an influx of these things coming into play? Do we have anything put into place for limiting, monitoring, or what do we have? Because I had a feeling we potentially could see this whoop coming in, and I'd like to get ahead of it before we get behind that.
So is that a request for a future, or maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah, I would like to put it on a committee of the board. Committee of the board.
well, and if I could follow up with that, at our AMC meeting.
Yeah.
They, yes, Julie Ring, the head of AMC, is very concerned about this because it's going to hit us quick. July 1, I think they start taking
It's
applications.
pretty confusing, the whole
Very confusing.
8,500 in population.
Right, very confusing. And a number of county, well, there is a resource on the AMC website under resource, again, it's hidden under resources. And I think there's a document, and I shared that with our new planning director. Some counties are putting a moratorium on to figure this out because the state hasn't got it figured out, but these applicants are going to start coming in. The discussion needs to be had. What do our small cities want? Are we in charge? But if they have their own zoning, and everything, they can shift that to the county.
Cool.
What's the city of Winona want? I haven't heard anything. So yes, it needs to be discussed.
Yeah, and so the second side that you brought up, the city side, was can we as a county also make this, to our municipalities, can we send out some sort of a letter that says, what are you doing to
Yeah.
prepare for this?
Do
And
they
know that
want-
the county board is also would like to discuss this. I think it'd be very beneficial to them. So
So,
making them aware.
so there was a request by Commissioner Nelson and I seconded by Commissioner Ward
Yes.
for a future committee of the board item
Yeah.
to review the status of the new cannabis changes. Is that a fair summary, Commissioner
Yeah.
Nelson?
I think
Correct.
what the topic I think was specific to with us allowing licenses.
Yeah,
Or,
Correct. It's
and I don't
a
know. how
broad
quick we
discussion
have
as to what we need to do.
A
for the-
check-in,
yeah,
a check-in.
so for
Yep.
sell,
Yep. And if it leads down those roads, yeah, this is an 80,000 foot.
not like, can you smoke on the sidewalk or not?
Exactly.
It's about
Commissioner
license.
Olson.
I'm guessing that the county attorney's office has probably looked into this already.
We have on different fronts, both the criminal as to people being able to smoke marijuana, but then getting in a car and driving.
Mhm.
And also the issue of, licensing of cannabis operations. So if you want us to work with, I guess, the health, oh, Eric left.
Yeah.
But would it be fair to say that we could object all we want, but if the state's language kind of permits these?
There are some
Does
cities,
it get into a legal hassle to?
I'd have to do some more research on it, but it's my understanding there are a few jurisdictions that have already put out moratoriums.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
guess
that's what they
That's true.
not allowed.
Yeah. So-
According to Julie Ring, not allowed.
Right.
You can't just have a moratorium on sales. You're required to allow at least one per 12,500. But she also said that if this is how I took it, like the city of Winona decided they didn't want to put any limits on it. Even if we had something for the county as a whole, their ordinance would supersede us.
Question.
But a small city could say, hey, we don't want to deal with it. We're going to go with the county,
Yep.
the smaller city.
This is the discussion why I'm
Yep.
bringing it up.
Yep.
So
So
I'd like to bring it to the,
Yeah.
yeah, 'cause we're starting it.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
thank
Do
you.
you want
It's-
us to prepare like a memo on,
Update.
from the legal point
Well,
of view or?
I guess I thought we were gonna do like a letter to the other community
That-
leaders
that
to
is-
seek to understand where are they at, what do they have in place?
Discuss it and let our questions come out in the
Right.
discussion.
Alright.
I think
But it needs
before
to
you
happen soon because,
The letter aspect, I think,
just to get an understanding,
Yeah.
so you have an idea.
and
what
maybe we get some
doing.
input back.
Because what Julie really, the AMC recommended is that you meet with every other municipality and they agree if the county's going to regulate it, regulate it. But if, like I said, if the city of Winona is like, nope, we're going to allow as many as they want, there is very little point in us.
Don't weed
Yeah.
themselves out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, there was lots of well comments right here. I was resisting and talking about puns.
Supply and
All is
demand.
well with the wells.
All is well with the wells.
No, sorry.
Okay.
All right.
All right,
Okay, that was it. That's all I had.
Mitchell will say it.
Great.
Okay, so that's just a request for a future committee of the board discussion. Anything else, Commissioner Nelson? Commissioner Ward?
Okay, Sheila Harms did talk about it. It is a Minnesota Department of Health. It's holding a series of public meetings for the response to the EPA nitrate letter. And there's four. There's a virtual one if people want to attend. I think, can we put this possibly on our website, Ms. Holte? Virtual one, and then the closest location is in Rushford on, the virtual one, I apologize, is June 20th, and the Rushford one is June 26th. And it's more information can be found on the MDH website and I'm not sure exactly what they're going to cover, but it's the health department. And then we covered the opioid thing. Township meeting is tomorrow night. Always well attended, especially if they can't make hay. If they're all making hay, it'll be lightly attended, but it might, weather will predict that, but that takes care of me. Thank you.
Commissioner Meyer.
Yep, so the WinLAC one, watershed one plan group met yesterday. Sheila could probably send these around if you're actually interested in seeing them electronically, but I will just say our first 2 years of funding were 577,000. And because of some changes made in the legislature, not this just passed, but the year before session, that funding went up 55%, which is fabulous. So then for the next 2 years, 25 and 26, we have almost $900,000. And we approved this plan, which is our work plan for the division of what the different funding is going to be spent on.
And
So
we is at Winona County, it's Winlac.
it's WinLAC,
Gotcha.
yeah,
So it's-
which is all the counties and the soil water districts in the water.
That's good.
Yeah, if you could have her send that out, that would be.
We will ask.
Anything else, Commissioner Meyer?
Nope, that was it.
Some quick things. I want to let the board know, and then Commissioner Ward know specifically that I apologize. I'll be missing the next meeting, which is June 25th. There's a multi-family event that required, anyway, long story short, I apologize. I will be gone on June 25th. So Commissioner Ward, you'll be here, right? So
Plant, yeah.
so she'll chair the meeting. I apologize for that. It's festival and parade season, Steamboat Days starting tomorrow. Thanks to all the people who organized that. Lewiston is the 22nd
Sounds right.
of June, and then we have Rolling Stone, I think in August, and then the State Fair, July 10th through the 14th.
That's,
The county fair.
County, I'm sorry,
And then we
yeah,
have
State
county
Fair,
fair.
10th to the 14th.
July 10th through the 14th. So
lots of.
thanks to all the folks who put those did not happen by themselves. And then lastly, I just want to, today is the funeral for the Minneapolis police officer who was killed in the line of duty, Jamal Mitchell. I had asked both Sheriff Ganrud and one or two other folks about that, and I believe they're up there today. So our thoughts and prayers are with the family of Mr. Jamal Mitchell. So is there anything else? I'm sorry. Need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Elson, seconded by Commissioner Olson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 5-8.
Yeah, please.
Board, just one item, 10.1, discuss county board ground rules policy. Ms. Holte, do you start us off on that?
So, previous meetings, the board requested that Ms. Sonneman give a legal review of ground rule number 8. So we worked on history, and Ms. Sonneman put together a memo in the packet. So do you want to start off your discussions or clarifying questions with Ms. Sonneman?
I'm totally confused after reading that memo. I didn't know what I was supposed to take out of that memo.
I guess maybe Karen, could you summarize it for
Yeah.
us?
We're asking for the simple form.
Okay, well, this was the simple form. Sorry. Ask an attorney for an opinion.
Mhm.
Um,
I know that's very dangerous.
They charge by the hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lori Jo.
and I would ask I have to be at first appearances at 11.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Our short staffing, which I'll talk to you about at budget time, but okay, that's another issue.
Don't
Um,
deviate.
What's that?
Don't deviate. Stay.
Yeah, well, I do have to be there at 11, so
This from Commissioner Ward.
Don't deviate.
we multitask in the
Yep.
office, so, yeah, I took the approach here because these ground rules, are pretty straightforward as far as what they are intended to be, which is not how to, interpret, or what would be policy and procedures about, let's say, how to, address a CUP, for instance, or to execute your policies which are in the form of ordinances. A policy becomes an ordinance through a procedure that you follow. These ground rules were adopted by you as a policy, which is, as I've put in here, and try, as I said, I'm trying to be pragmatic and common sense and logical interpretation, not,
Mhm.
not make it legalistic.
Mhm.
Because just reading it, for what it stands for, is what I've said in here is that it's really to guide you in the conduct of your meeting. I mean, you look at the headline, the headings for each, for the policy itself, decorum, meeting, let me get to those, sorry.
Yep, meeting decorum.
Management, it's really, rules on behavior, how to behave and why. And that's behavior for you as elected officials, doing your duty under, and then I'll throw in the law 375, which is the main statute that governs what a county board does and doesn't do. So these rules were adopted really, uh, as a means to set, I shouldn't use the definition in the definition, the ground rules. But, again, it's behavioral rules. And I think you've all seen that there's been a lot of, in many city councils, other county boards, just a lot of divisiveness, incivility that's been going on. And, these ground rules really govern, just kind of the basics of here's how to, handle each of your public meetings. This is a public meeting. If you run a committee, or if, and it's also to apply to, say, the planning commission or the board of adjustment, any of the county's committees, work groups, whatever you establish. But, so when, again, this is not an ordinance. It is not something that, should be used to, quell, let's say, uh, debate on, an issue that really has a better place in your, what I'm thinking of is, on where this came up in a context, I think is the idea of, okay, when can you reconsider something?
Mhm.
And one of the things that, both Ms. Holte and myself talked about was that among the things that these rules were designed to was to avoid having essentially reconsideration over and over and over again on an issue. Which then, as I pointed out in my memo, really, may, make in the public's eyes the perception that you can't make a decision.
Mhm.
And you can't stick with it. So in some ways, this policy is simply, again, behavioral. Well, again, I think I told Maureen, I have a book on my, if you want to come to my office, it's called How to Behave and Why.
Mhm.
And it's really for kids, but it's also for adults. It was written by the same author that did Ferdinand the Bull, if anybody read that book to their children or grandchildren. So this is a adult form of that, this policy, again, of ground rules and starting off with meeting decorum. And then agendas, how agendas are run, the role of the chairperson, management, and goals. So, and I looked at other boards' rules that were similar to this. Some have chapter on chapter of stuff, I think this is good to be very succinct, but granted, there are some sections that might have been written a little more clearly. But overall, again, as I've said in my memo here, that you need to take a very common sense and logical interpretation of these rules, because to do otherwise, and this is the first and second paragraph of the memo, is to misinterpret what is a straightforward policy of providing guidance, and this is from the policy, in the management of public meetings and related activities conducted on behalf of Winona County and its affiliates. And it applies not only to the commissioners, to you, 5 individuals, but it applies to appointed officials, meeting attendees, and others. So, and that's why when there may be a disruption at a meeting by, certain attendees, these rules can be pointed to and used to ask those people to either be quiet or they'll be removed. So,
So, okay, so if, that's all good and said, and yes, we need to be civil and everything, and
Yeah.
yes, we've seen a big deterioration in
Mhm.
public meetings. Under the first one, the meeting decorum, number 8, when will we require a 4/5 vote then on anything? We talk about trying to get, good policy and simple majorities seem to rule, but I don't remember why we put the 4/5. Where does number 8 fall in how we do things?
right, and number 8 is, as I identified, problematic. I mean, that's the whole point of why you asked me to look at it.
Right.
However,
We put it in
From-
there initially.
right,
for
but
some
from a
reason.
legal point of view, you have to look at the totality of the policy. And the totality of the policy says that this is really a a set of behaviors and expectations and procedures.
So
to
everything,
run a meeting.
nothing we do and you stated statutes and everything, and I didn't go looking at statutes. Is there anything that we do as county commissioners that requires a 4/5 vote? Or is it all simply done by straight majority?
But there's certain things in Robert's Rules of Order that require.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it's in there, is there? Is there anything in there that has 4/5?
Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
I think calling the question requires 4/5.
There's- And that is, I think, does it say in here? I forget if Robert's rules. of
2/3
order
isn't the
says
same as
so.
4/5.
No, it is
No,
not.
see, so there's nothing on here that says 4/5.
And 375, if, I'd have to look at it again to fine tooth it, but does not say anything about the.
I guess one of the bigger things that I have though is that, and again, I'm just trying to understand this, correct me if I'm wrong, but in one breath, basically what I'm hearing is this is just a guideline. But if you get out of hand, then it's enforced. So is that subject to who decides when it's out of hand? I mean, it either applies all the time or it applies none of the time. And it's just rough.
And do we need a 4/5 vote to determine if it applies?
I mean, if I read line item 8, there is zero confusion to me what that means. So there's no, it either applies or it doesn't apply. And so whether it's, if we want to put a terminology or stumble around it or whatever, it really boils down to it either does or doesn't.
I agree that it's clear. Number 8.
There's, I didn't write it, but I can read it.
Well, before Ms. Holte goes, here's how it's clear to me, and maybe I'm off, is it only refers to procedural things with the board in terms of putting items back on the agenda. If a final decision has been made on any issue, then you need to wait a year. Is that correct? Is that how you interpret it?
That's how I interpret it.
Okay, that seems straightforward to me as well. Ms. Holte?
So the concept of why that verbiage was put in, again, was so that when a policy decision, meaning the board says, this is our policy moving forward, staff start moving in that direction, we develop policy, we develop procedures, and we move forward, that the board isn't able to then turn around and at a month later, 2 months later and say, oh, we want to change policy.
Without a 4/5, meaning that if it's a
Right.
greater thing,
Yes.
yes, so that is exactly how I interpret that. So I'm not sure how we can in one hand and can't in the other hand enforce that. If it's just a guideline for, well, be nice to everybody. No, it's either is or it isn't, regardless of the nice factor. It either exists as a law or a rule, or it doesn't exist. Now, if somebody gets out of hand, we point to the rule and say, no, I'm sorry, this is what it is. Please calm back down. So I'm not sure how we can say that this is a feel-good way to conduct our meetings. But then, well, if you step out of line, we point to line item X, Y, Z. It either is or it isn't.
And if I could just, I'm not saying it's a feel-good policy, it's a
That's just
policy that
my-
sets,
Yeah.
well, and maybe because I said how to behave and why, I mean, but you do have to have structure
Yep.
to run a meeting, and this is what the structure is. And you also have to put in front of the public, here are the expectations for yourselves, for anybody who is in, because it does say here, and it should really, other counties have this, that this is the expectation of behavior. And there's a lot of other things in this. I mean, this is kind of a omnibus, if you want to call it. That's a favorite word now, right? Omnibus policy that covers a lot. But it really is the procedure to follow. And it's not a law, that's correct, but it is your policy and you've deemed it to be the policy and people need to follow it.
Where I guess I got that from is in paragraph 6 in your letter, it says common sense and logic dictate. So common sense and logic dictate that section A8, meeting decorum, and section E1 must be read in the context, must be read. My common sense must be read that the policy is not a policy that governs the specific legal processes and procedures the county board must follow, meaning that it's blue sky. It is that literally, I'm just reading what you wrote here, meaning that it's a feel good. It's hey, it's not actually enforced. I see it different. My comment says that if it's there, that's how we either follow it or we don't need to follow it. It can't be both. So it can't be enforced if somebody steps out of line, but as long as we're all civil, then it's free game. So, right, that's where I'm basing my decision or my thought process is, because you say in here that common sense says it should not be looked at as a governing policy. So it either is or it isn't.
Well, I'm saying that it shouldn't be looked at as something that you would follow when you have to follow a statutory rule or law. And I shouldn't say statutory rule. There are rules. Minnesota has rules and Minnesota has statute, and they're all the law. So when you make a decision, say in a planning process, or if the EDA of the Economic Development Authority that this board has established and created makes a decision, there are certain laws that apply to those decisions of anything you make.
So
Really.
is it or isn't it enforceable?
I don't think it is.
Well, it's
What are you gonna
not,
do?
right. I mean, it doesn't,
I don't think you can take me to court.
well, it,
That's what I'm just trying to get the answer,
doesn't
because right now we're like floating in this gray area.
it does establish, again, it's ground rules. And so it establishes.
But a rule to me is something that you have to follow. A speed limit is a rule. It's so if I don't get to be like, well, sorry, I was nice to you, cop, I get out of it.
Right.
But so it either is or it isn't. So that's what I'm trying to
No,
determine.
You're making it black and white.
Yeah.
I'm a black and white sort of
Right.
person.
No,
Well-
I think the closest example I can think of is Minnesota has which Minnesota has something called the Conservation Improvement Program. And we have requirements about how much every utility, gas and electric, are supposed to reduce their end users' energy use in every year, right? And Xcel Energy is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, and they can enforce that on them, and they could probably penalize them. But My Energy is governed by its own board because it's a rural cooperative electrical utility. And what they get is a letter from the Department of Commerce that says, you didn't follow the rule from the Conservation Improvement Program and you should do better, but that's it, right? So some things you get a reprimand, but that's all there is to it, right?
So my question becomes, then why even have the rule? If it's not enforceable, it is or it isn't, it's in this gray area, then what's the point of it?
We have it because the ultimately, if somebody was upset at how the board was running something and we didn't have these policies, they could say there's nothing to govern how this board.
But if we don't have to follow it, what does it
No,
matter?
But we, as a board, you are saying this is what we expect of.
If I don't have to follow, what would dictate that we have to have a 4/5 vote majority then? What would dictate that? If it isn't required, what would actually
You
enforce it?
required it of yourself,
Yeah, there you go.
so.
I mean, the other one would be like if you were misbehaving and saying you were swearing at all of us, or someone was doing all of that stuff, we could ask them to leave, right?
Right.
What if they chose not to leave?
Then we could have them removed, and then if they try to sue the county, and that's what I was trying to get at, then we would say, well, we have these rules in place, and they are rules in the sense of you have made a decision that this is how you are gonna conduct business as a body that has been established under 375.
But the rule isn't enforceable.
That's right.
Well,
So as a chair, Commissioner, and again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but let's just say if.
It's a
let's just
lawyer's
say-
meeting.
Yes, this is
Great.
This is just great. So as a chair, you're going to have to ask, let's say somebody makes a motion in a second that goes against the policy. Okay, and again, I want clarity because I want to know how to operate. And let's say there was a 3/5 vote that comes through to bring something back up. I'm just going to use the very example, but it could be literally any of these things on here. That a 3/5 vote comes into play, and you know clearly that in the framework, in our policy, it requires a 4/5 vote. Would you pass that motion going against? Because it's ultimately you to declare the pass.
Ideally, the policy shouldn't be dependent upon who's sitting in the chair seat. It should be
Would it go
clear.
to the parliamentarian?
Well, it should be clear.
well,
I think the rules that we set for, the rules that this board or a prior board set for future boards requires 4/5. So to me, it seems clear.
Right, but what we're saying is that doesn't make a difference. Ultimately, the chair is going to say pass or fail. So if something comes up that goes against what's laid out in that policy, and there's a first and a second, and it's a 3/5 vote, but clearly it needs a 4/5 vote, would you pass it?
I don't think, I mean, according to A8, it should not, if it's been a policy decision, it shouldn't be passed for
Right.
1 year.
But what's being discussed right now is that policy doesn't make a difference.
it does though, that's I mean, think of, okay, the legislature, our Minnesota legislature, or the US and US Congress, they have their own rules of operation. They are not in law, they operate under the Constitution. But if they do not follow the law, then somebody could, I'm sorry, not the law, their rules. And this is entitled a rule, but, think of the ethical behavior, problems that Congress has had. Then they have their own committees to investigate that. The punishment of it is, usually expulsion. But there's no criminal punishment. There's no criminal punishment for violating this rule. But if we didn't have these rules, number one, it'd be kind of anarchy. And number two, somebody could say, well, you don't have any rules. And so, they could sue us.
There's a rule about that thing.
I can't get it to mute. I don't know why I won't mute. It's like the sound's off and it keeps dinging.
I think there's a rule in there about that.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just-
can't get it to stop.
Okay, we're gonna chastise you. We're
Yeah.
gonna publicly,
I don't know what it is. Look at the sound is off.
I know you've been playing with
I've
it,
been
trying to get it
things
to
turn
silence.
off.
So I think, and we are a committee of the board, right? So I can say,
Yep.
Josh,
Yep.
you're looking for some, I guess, certainty. And I am also, as I said, I'm very pragmatic and I try to have certainty, but there's not certainty in what this board or any board, frankly, that's been authorized by the state of Minnesota or whatever. 375 gives you certain powers to operate as a
So,
county.
so what I hear is that,
So,
so what I hear, besides all the gray area law interpretation, is that this is just subject to whether I want it to apply or not. A motion could come up that goes against this policy, and if the chair so decides to pass it, it passes, whether it's 3/5 or 4/5. because we created the policy and it's not state statute, it is really subject to whether we want to follow it or not.
Well, but then it's sort of like
So why have the
Trying to
rule
be-
at all?
well, because again, you have to set guidelines, you have to set your own policies and procedures so that there's the expectation both of yourselves.
But if they're not
And the
being
public.
followed, what negates it as,
Well,
what negates it?
your county administrator and your county attorney will tell you you're not following your own policy. So, and as Maureen said, when you start not following this policy and making changes over and over and over again and
Yeah, I
throwing
get that.
staff, back to.
But okay,
do
so let's say
something
it
different.
happens, what would happen? Let's say that were to happen. Let's just say that I brought up something about, I don't know, but we talked about cannabis. I bring up something
Mhm.
about cannabis. We
And you
pass a
change your
deal.
mind.
2 months down the road, we decide, you know what, we want to change it. And I decide I want to change it, and we get 3 of us to do it, but it takes a 4/5 vote to actually do it. And we say, yeah, we want to pass it. The chair goes through with it. That literally goes against the policy. What stops it, and what are the?
Well, somebody who might have been affected by that policy and then you change your mind, 2 weeks later could potentially sue the county. or
Because
take
it
an action.
required the 4/5 vote that we have set as policy, correct? Even though it's not law.
You're not following your own policy. You also, I think it's important, and this goes to the importance to staff of this policy, is that if the board continues to change its mind and say, oh no, after somebody's worked for 3 months on something, eventually you're gonna burn out your staff.
I'm not here,
Well,
we're
but, I
trying to
mean,
discuss the
I'm trying to-
politics. of
Well,
this.
but
Yeah,
that's-
I understand the concept of why it's in place. What I'm trying to get down to is we either can and have to, or we don't, and it's subject to whatever. It either is or it isn't in my mind, and I can't figure out why I realize if somebody wants to sue us, okay, I see that side. But to me, when you have a policy, you follow the policy. So that's what I'm just trying to figure out. It just seems like we have this policy, but it's only there as a safeguard. We don't really have to follow it. And if somebody decides to sue us, they can sue us based that we didn't follow a policy that we didn't have to follow to begin with.
Maureen, I think Maureen had a
So just as a reminder,
It's
as elected officials, whether you were present at the time that this was established or not, it is a ground rule that is for the board, established by the board.
right.
If you're not in agreement with it, you have the power and ability to modify. The other thing is whether or not any one commissioner or the board as a whole complies is completely within your control. That's not anybody else who's going to tell any of you whether or not you must do that. You as an elected official need to decide if you're going to comply with what you've established as your ground rules. What we can do is collectively hold each other accountable. So sometimes it may happen that a decision is made and without realizing that it was a conflict with your rules. Then to come back and say, you know what, we shouldn't have done that. But if to knowingly make a decision that conflicts with the rules is a total different thing. But again, that's not for me to say you can't do it, because you can. Is it the right thing to do? That's your decision. But what I'm saying is that these are ground rules to help the decorum, to help the process of meetings. It's not intended to be black and white, kind of hard and fast. I mean, you have to have some boundaries. But to help each other comply with it is what I think is key here. I don't think any of you don't want to comply with it.
But I'm going to take off on your word, a boundary. So a boundary to me is an area that you don't cross. And what I'm trying to determine is where don't you cross? And so to me, you lay the policy out to say that's the non-crossing point. You don't cross that boundary. And so again, I mean, it eventually has to come to some sort of black and white. Otherwise, the policy, it's a fallacy. It's just a piece of paper with words on it, letters on it, because if it's not followed, if there's not a boundary, and the boundary is laid out in the policy that says this is where we don't cross the line. And subject, I mean, I could stand up and do whatever I want. Yeah, it's a free country, but I'm going to be subject to some sort of penalty if it falls outside of a boundary. So to me, that's what I'm looking for. I am a very black and white person. If it says that something has been visited and it's a 4/5 rule or majority that takes to overcome it, then that is the boundary in which it takes to cross the threshold. If it said 3/5, that would be the boundary in which it takes to cross the threshold. So to me, I'm looking forward to make sure I understand, because if I read this correctly, based on law or based on our lawyer, is that common sense says I should ignore this policy.
I don't think that, I agree with you, Josh. I think that this is clear and that I think it is black and white in many ways. I mean, there is the possibility of changing the rules, but I think I agree with you. This is clear. And there really isn't. Now, Commissioner Ward, you had a question about number 8 a couple meetings ago, but I think even that one is clear, I think, in terms of when it does and doesn't apply. So in my mind, this is clear until and unless this or a future county board changes the rules. These are the rules. Right?
I see this as the boundary.
Yep. I feel like we're
But
talking
there's
past each
no-
other a little
There's
bit.
no date on here, and I don't know, did we all sign something?
There's a date, it was supersedes policy.
But if, once you sign something, are you bound for it forever? Isn't there a statute of limitations?
Until you change the rules.
Until you change, right, the policy.
There's 2020.
Been a while.
If I can point out.
Oh,
like I
we
said,
updated it.
We adopt them every year, though.
Well, you can review them and decide. I mean,
To me, it's clear.
I don't understand why we're having a 30-minute discussion.
could I just make a point? Sorry. Like I said, I looked at other counties' policies, and one which, if you want a lot of pages, but I think it's good, is Dakota County. And maybe you can talk to your fellow commissioners about it. But Dakota County sets out the purpose of the policy, and it's 18 pages, okay? And a statement of principles about why you are adopting this policy. And they talk about it as being a policy and guidelines
Does
to
one
operate,
see everything?
Hold on, guys. I apologize.
let me just read what it says, because this is important, and that's why we have this policy. The Dakota County Board of Commissioners is the body charged by law with the management of the affairs of Dakota County, just as you are, but with Winona County. The county board operates as a deliberative and legislative assembly, meeting to discuss and determine the direction and policies of the county within the confines of state and federal law. And you act, as I've put in here too, on behalf of and are held accountable by the citizens of Dakota County. And you function within the statutory framework of the law, which, as again, I mentioned in my memo, which is 375 in principally. And Minnesota statute supersedes all bylaws, rules, policies established by the board. So,
Right.
And what I like about Dakota's, and this kind of answers maybe your, well, I wouldn't call them concerns, Josh, but why the board should follow its own rules and policies, is that these operating rules of Dakota County Board of Commissioners are intended to facilitate the transaction of business by the county board and its committees. And they're intended to strike a procedural balance that considers all principles and enunciates a specific process by which these principles interact and work.
I don't think we're debating what it's for. We're debating line item 8 in 1, saying, is that enforceable?
Yeah,
I don't negate why, what, how. I'm trying to break this down because in your description, you said this is subject to non-enforcement.
I think Marcia's original question was AA, correct me, I don't want
Yes.
to,
Yeah.
it was AA.
And it stems from a long time, rural residents, and it goes right into the planning issues, planning and
Mhm.
zoning.
Mhm.
Is
But
where.
Right.
I think the short answer is that 4/5 only applies to revisit a final decision within a year. That's the only time that 4/5.
Is it enforceable? That's my question.
That year is, so, okay, is the year the magic drop dead item? Or is it the 4/5 vote, the drop dead?
Well, this says within a year, it takes a
The year.
4/5 to overdo
Yeah.
it.
Right.
But my question is in one breath, we're saying it's not enforceable. And so that's why I turn to the chair and say, if somebody brings it up and it only gets 3 votes, are you going to pass it?
I should not, based on the current interpretation of the rules, correct?
Right, if it's. a
There it is.
But it's enforced, each of you, and as Maureen pointed out, a former board comprised not of everybody on the board now adopted this, but you have the obligation to follow these as a board until you decide to change them.
Right. Yeah,
So
we
it's
move with the option to
enforceable-
change
It's
it.
enforceable by each of you.
And if we
the
change the
board.
rule, it would take 4/5 vote to change it again.
I don't think that. I think
It's
that's-
less than.
Within a year, right? I mean, the policy, is
Changing policy,
if we
if
change
it's the same policy.
and there's a final determination.
That's right.
But we
And
decided this
after
wasn't,
a year.
I think I heard this isn't policy, this is just ground rules.
Guidance.
Yeah, so
It
it's not,
says it's a guidance document.
not a policy.
Again, it's,
So if it's just a guidance and it's not enforceable, then it's just basically words on a piece of paper.
but it's not, and again, it's how government functions in a orderly fashion to, as it says, to facilitate the business of the board. Without it, it'd be a free-for-all.
It is a
So-
free for all if you don't enforce it.
Right.
If you're not held to this
The
expectation.
question, will it take us 4/5 of a
You
vote
establish
to
this expectation.
remove any one of us from the room if we're misbehaving? I don't know.
Who's gonna do it?
I don't know. I don't.
You're the bouncer.
Yeah,
There you go.
he's the bouncer.
I have to disagree, politely disagree. You can't have a rule and enforce it and not enforce it. You can't do it. How can you have it and say you have to follow it, but yet you don't have to follow it?
I agree with him, is that to me, it's clear. So
You can't be both.
it's clear, right? The question Marcia raised was that it applied to everything, and the answer is no, right? It only applies to revisiting within 1 year, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
like
The
today,
final decision.
okay,
Final
but like
decision.
today, we approved, but again, they're contracts, they're not policy. So all that water stuff. So
Mhm.
say all of a sudden we decide, we don't care about the water. We don't want to do any of that stuff. So if we wanted to disregard all those things, but that's not policy, that was grant.
Contract.
And
Yeah,
right, you
yeah, so
sign a
that doesn't-
contract and you have to look at the
Yeah.
terms. and
The
conditions.
concept you're
So-
after is if the board collectively tries to change its mind after a decision, does line item 8 come into play?
Does it have to be 1 year?
If it's subjective
Then
to
it-
just, nah,
Well,
it's
and
only
if
if
it-
we get sued, we don't actually have to follow.
Okay, as it says, well, Dakota has it out very clearly, and I have it in my memo this policy, this ground rules does not, trump the, state rules or federal rules. So,
We know that.
well, I know you know that, but there are other rules that apply specifically to decisions you make about other, very specific.
So is this enforceable or not? Should we follow this?
Well, you're
or not
asking
follow?
enforceable by who? By the courts?
Do we have
Probably not.
do we have
by
an
you, yes.
expectation to follow this or
That's-
not follow?
Yes, because you.
You
as
said
the
it as the
board-
rules.
Yeah, as the
Right.
board.
So that contradicts paragraph 6, line item, because and you said in there that common sense says that this is not
You're
a
saying about
governing
my
policy.
memo, not. the-
Correct.
Okay.
What you wrote in there says common sense and logic dictate it must be read in the context that policy is not a policy that governs, and specific legal processes and procedures the county board must follow as described earlier in this memo. As the policy plainly states, it's for the management of public meetings, relative activities. So we either follow it or we don't. And in my mind, what I'm hearing is that we do follow this.
We do, I'm sorry, you follow this, and what I said in my memo is that this policy doesn't govern specific legal obligations and responsibilities that you have separate from this.
That
policy.
clarifies that. So I agree with
Okay.
Josh. What he's
Mhm.
saying, that could be construed as, but if it's other items outside of the board functioning, then
Right.
that makes sense. But in terms of how the board functions, we make rules and apply them to ourselves. That seems clear, and
Yes.
we should abide by the
Right,
rules.
as long as they don't,
Conflict with state or
state or
laws,
federal
yeah.
law.
Maybe we
So
should
line item eight
eliminate
should
the word
be-
policy on the very top of the document. It says policy, Winona County Board Ground. Maybe we should just remove policy.
No, I think we need to leave it, you know. The question posed is, do we follow this or not follow this? That's all I'm trying to get down to.
And you agree, and I agree, yes, we should.
We should.
We'll
Yeah.
try.
Yep.
We'll try.
Following the rules of
That was
decorum.
a 20-minute answer.
It's good to,
to a
it's an
2-second question.
exercise in clarification.
Well,
Motion to adjourn.
but Greg, with that, how do we get to the moon? That's a 0.3 of a second question, but it takes a lot to get there. So sometimes we have to
Well,
have.
I know, but I do believe.
So
that
I'm sorry that we took up a little bit of your time.
You said from the beginning that
I'm sorry we took a little bit of time.
to read the way it does. And I
Right.
think we all agreed. And I'm kind of wondering why we're arguing about something we all agree on. But
Second Greg's motion to adjourn.
Disagree
It's
with that.
still not clear.
Where, any other discussion, motion by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Meyer, any other discussion before we adjourn? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
what's that for?
No, it's good to go through this and clarify it because
Dakota
Commissioner
County,
Ward.
can you send that to me?
Here, I'll just give you the copy.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I
And
can-
Commissioner Meyer, I sent you, but I think if you're going to Shack, you have a conflict too. The EM,
I'm going to Micah and then I'm gonna stay overnight up there, so I should be able
oh, okay, because,
to go from
The-
my mother-in-law's house, yeah.
okay, so you will Zoom the EMS in
And
Rochester.
I answered you, but
Oh,
yeah, but
okay, I didn't-
you were driving, so I
Okay.
will send the